Welcome, hijos del rol, once more to this channel for this very special episode of A Story Always. And I know every time we make an interview, I say it is special, but this time is especially special because today with us we have the pleasure of having Ron Edwards.
He had to think about that. He said, "We have who? Who? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. That guy.
That guy, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, just Ron Edwards. Which
Thank you.
which I imagine some of you may already know, maybe. But for those of you who don't know Ron Edwards, if there's anyone out there who somehow doesn't know him, he's the designer of such influential games as Sorcerer, Trollbabe, Circle of Hands, which I have there totally randomly.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, just happened to be there. He's one of the co-creators of the Forge, and also very influential online forum for independent role-playing games publishing and RPG theory and actual plays and really cool stuff that went there. He has his own publishing company, Adept Press. He's a RPG designer consultor, and he's also working on a new game called Vigil, which I encourage you to check out, and I hope we will get to talk a little bit about it later. And today we are here to talk about a new project he's launching very soon called Adept Play. And yeah, but first of all, thanks a lot, Ron, for being with us today.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and I deseo saber por qué no hablamos en español. So, to explain to everybody, I'm afraid yo estoy temeroso porque deseo hablar en español, pero yo vivo ahora yo vivo en Suecia.
Suecia.
So tengo que practicar mi sueca. Si yo hablo español, voy a olvidarme todo mi sueca.
Yeah, we are not going to make
so
Ron.
I'm afraid. But I do love Spanish, and I miss it. It was the language that I studied the most, or my first language that I studied as a native English speaker, and it surrounded me in California as I grew up. And so el nombre de mi madre es Isaguirre. I don't know if you know that. And so so basically, yes, I have a great love for Spanish, and it makes me a little sad that I can't, I'm not going to be able to do that right now. Maybe another time when I'm better in Swedish.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Yeah, I think living in Sweden, it is important that you now concentrate on Swedish and maybe later Spanish.
Well, that's relevant too, because you asked about Adept Play, and Adept Play is the company that I am beginning here in Sweden. I'm going to basically absorb the activity of Adept Press into just being one small part of Adept Play, and it is going to be centered around a new website. So that is the entire point, really. What's your company? I have a website. How exciting. And so the nature of this website, however, is very simple. There are just 3 sections. They have very simple functions. And one of them is the big one, the only one. If people would only go to one of these, this is the one I want them to do. It's called Actual Play. Do you know where the term, as it's currently used as a way to post on the internet, do you know where the term Actual Play came from?
I believe from the Forge, right?
It did. It did. That was the name of a forum when Clinton, Nixon, and I designed the first forums there, we said we need people to talk about real play and what it was like. I had done some reviews already for other websites, and I didn't like doing reviews because all they were, I always had to say, well, this is just me playing this game. And I hated the idea of me being some kind of general or intermediate person between other people and the game. I was just another gamer, just another role player with a game, and I wanted to talk about it. I had things to say about it, but I wasn't special. So that's what I wanted to do. So I realized, what do I really want to do? I just want to talk about playing these things. And we said, you know what? All the posts about play should be about a game, should be like this. So we didn't, and that's why there are so few reviews at the Forge. We finally realized that was a terrible idea, and let's just all play games and talk about them. So,
so you wanted to translate the conversation in the table, and that's the actual play?
No, it's not. In fact, that's a common misconception, which is the idea that this is a journalistic or transcription of play. And that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm saying that you can reflect about play for hundreds of reasons. You can simply reflect about it to say, that was a wonderful time, and then maybe you might be interested in saying, well, why? You know, not every time is wonderful. Why was this wonderful? Or, for example, you might say, what is it in the rules of this game that we used that had a special feeling or a certain influence that we noticed? Or that when looking back, I wonder about that. Or you could be more analytical and say, well, this is the third game I have played by this person, and the first two were like this, and this one's totally different, and this is why. I don't care. Anything. Analytical, or maybe some foolish person presented some idea about how role-playing works. And you, instead of just being something in this person's head, you're a real person who has played a real game. Maybe you're able to say, is that an applicable idea here? So all of those things. And so it's really reflecting upon and having meaningful dialogue about it. But of course, you have to say, what game was I playing? It might be a good idea to think about who you were playing with. If you were playing with well, it could be anything. I mean, imagine playing with 3 or 4 other people, and now think about some entirely different game you played at a different time, and the context is completely different. Maybe this time you are the youngest person and not the oldest person. Maybe this time you are, you know, the person teaching the game to the others, and another time you are not. Maybe one of the players is your brother in this group. That makes a difference. Right? All these things. So who are the people, more or less? I mean, I'm not expecting birth certificates or anything, but you know, who are the people more or less in kind of any kind of socially relevant sense? And what game are you playing? And bring up any aspect of what happened. It's nice to know what happened in the fiction, but that doesn't mean I need you to suddenly go into fictional mode and narrate the whole fiction. And so it really depends. It depends. Talk a little bit about what it's like to play. Talk a little bit about what the elf did. Talk a little bit, you know, about your thoughts, or, you know, maybe you're saying this was a horrible, horrible experience. I want to give up on this whole hobby. Horrible. Terrible. And but really, I mean, these are strong feelings. What are we talking about?
I think maybe this is just my impression, but I think one of the distinctive things about the way people talk about games in the Forge, in the actual play forum, it was that the center of it was how the players felt about the game, how they experienced it. Do you think that's true? Is that something that you want to bring back?
Yes, I do. In many ways, this is taking the same concept of the old actual play forum, but it's going to be a lot more fun for 2 reasons. One is that I'm going to be encouraging recordings. So whether they are, you know, recordings like this on screens, or whether you have a camera set up in your room, or whether you have an audio recording only, or or whatever, then it's not required, but it's encouraged. And my experience is that although it seems a little tricky the first couple of times you do it, you feel awkward and not the way you ordinarily play, you get over it pretty fast though. And it's not that bad. And pretty soon, and it's interesting, sometimes you might say, well, that was a pretty good session. And if you wrote about it in words, you would say, hey, we had a great session. But you're looking at it now and you're kind of going, how great was it? Or on the other hand, it may be very different. You may say, I don't feel like anything happened. And then you look at the table and you realize how much fun everybody is having. You say, did John, it seemed like he didn't have any fun. And then you're looking at him and he's loving every second. Yeah. He just didn't talk much.
Do you think is going to change the way, or is going to affect the way we discuss games and the new forum compared to the forts and similar things?
Well, yes, because what I want to focus on is that this is a human activity where the human capabilities and our social aspects, the way we think, is very powerful. So this is something that I've always said, is that for all of my talk about systems and dice and numbers and things, they are all subroutines to the way that we are interacting and creating. Now, when that statement was made before we had these discussions, it was a way for people to say, well, if that's the case, then we don't need all those dice and numbers. But that's not my logic. My logic is that the design of those procedures can be very constructive. It doesn't replace the way we talk and think and create, but it can be very, very constructive. And one thing I noticed, okay, this is a good example. The first time that we were playing Legends of the Five Rings.
Oh, that was my first
Legends
game.
Of Five, was it? And we had 3-player characters. We had a fairly long run. I was not the game master. I was playing. Well, I will tell you all about the character if you are interested. But the point is that we noticed that the host of the game, he had a roommate, and the roommate kept being there every session, every week. The roommate was there. And we kept saying things like, well, sorry for bothering you or taking up, making noise in your apartment. We kept saying that. And then he kept being there and he kept staying there. And sooner or later we asked him, why are you here? And he said, are you kidding? I would never miss an episode. And we looked at each other. This was 2001. Okay, so this is 16 years ago. And we looked at each other and said, are you kidding? Is this actually fun to watch? Everybody knows role-playing is boring to watch. And he says, no, it's better than a TV show. You're imagining it. I'm imagining it. I totally get what's happening. And, shut up and play. It's time to start.
Start the episode already.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I kept my eyes open after that. I started inviting, instead of shooing everybody away from a table, I started just going ahead and play even if somebody was sitting there. And if they're, instead of running off to a closed room and making sure that nobody saw this filthy thing that we were doing, I said, let's go ahead and, talk to each other. If you're at the table with us, even if you're not technically playing, there's no reason. And people did this. They would just talk as if they were playing. The ordinary talk of people who are really engaged in what's going on, but they're not saying what their character does or something. But they are interested. They're talking. And so even if it's just to encourage somebody or to, speak up. And so people would do that, and they would we realized that role-playing is boring to watch when the game you are playing is when it's boring. That's all. It's very simple. If the game is boring to play and boring to do, and the way you are doing it, you are bored or you are unhappy or you are disengaged, then of course it's boring to watch. But if you're not, then it's not boring. And I got to realize that it's a lot like live music. That a group, and I don't mean a really rehearsed live performance where it's more like a theatrical performance. It's more like people playing together and other people happen to enjoy seeing it and being there too. And part of the fun is that you appreciate how much fun they're having together.
Yes.
You made an example on Sorcerer, I recall, about a jazz group, right? Everyone, it's like a band of jazz where it does apply in that example. So apart from being a band of jazz, everyone playing his instrument, there's the audience out there that hears that music. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do, but I think that that's more in the sense of a live concert. And while I'm not going to discount that, it's actually extremely difficult to play something that you made in the studio. It's very difficult to play that live. And so I'm not saying that's nothing. And yes, the way the audience reacts and everything is also very important. I'm not saying that's nothing. I'm thinking in a more intimate circumstance, in either a non-professional setting, or maybe it is in a professional setting, but it's between or after the formal time.
Yeah, just like a few friends are jamming out together. And
right, and they might jam, or they might play a folk song or something, like an old song that everybody knows, or maybe they'll try something that one of them made up, and they had no intention of playing this in front of other people, but why not? We're all here, everybody's enjoying themselves, why not? And so in those circumstances, it's kind of like the aspects of performance are still there, but they have a different dynamic, and the people who are watching could kind of just as easily be one of you. And so that's what it would be like for role-playing. And I've seen it happen in reality enough times that I'm starting to think that it would be really fun to bring that forward into a website context, at least as an option.
Yeah.
Furthermore, now I'm not talking about doing it live, like streaming it. That might be an option for later, but right now I'm still talking about recordings.
Yeah.
Just because I am not going to run a live streaming. I'm not going to organize any live, event.
Yeah,
that's my job. I'm not going to do it. So maybe later. But the other thing that's going to make it fun is that what I hear again and again from people is they say we miss the way that Conversations at the Forge talked about something, and they really focused on the thing, and you had to make sense, and you had to be courteous, and really courteous, not just fake courteous. And regardless of whether you didn't like it when I said, start a new thread, or would you give the guy a rest or something? You're bullying him, you're yelling at him, whatever. People later have told me that they really miss that. And what I miss is the institutional memory. What I miss is that the threads always remained in place in time, in artificial recorded time. They occupied that spot, and you could investigate things in an organized archival way. So I'm setting this up not to be a forum. It looks more like a blogish type media format, but all of its functionality uses forum logic. So it's an attempt to stay with the times and recognize that people are used to a new visual and interface format that looks more like a blog or more like a little bit more social media style. But on the other hand, the capacity to go into the archive and see it all as a library is going to be very easy.
That's
So that's it.
That's interesting because one of the criticizers that were especially at the end of the fourth, as I believe, was that at some point there was so much content from before that anyone that came anew had had years and years of super interesting, super, but also super deep.
The problem with that is not the depth of the content, I imagine. The problem is its accessibility.
Yes, I think maybe that new format is a way of making it easier to access and organize that kind of content.
That's correct, and also because the endeavor that I'm after is somewhat less, it's much more focused. It means that you don't really have so many categories to attack it by. There's less ways to attack it, and it's a little simpler, I think. There is another section. That's one section.
Okay, yeah.
Correct. The other section is called seminar.
Mm-hmm.
And seminar will often be me giving presentations. It might be accompanied by slides, or it might be accompanied with me drawing things on a board, or it might be me debating somebody, or someone else would like to give a seminar, so they will do it together with me, and have a little discussion. Many of them will be activities where people can sign up for them. And so they get recorded in as the activity. But seminar, therefore, will be addressing very basic questions of what is role-playing. And it begins with the idea that if you take away assumptions of content, so take away the idea that this is part of, that it is rooted in a specific kind of fantasy and then branches out from there, take away that idea. Second, take away the idea that it's even part of pop culture. So it has to be, if it's not about dragons and elves, then it has to be about, ninjas, or cat girls or something, or, vigilante superheroes. Let's get it away. Let's just open it up and say, okay, look, it can be about anything. It's fiction, right? This is fiction. Fiction can be about anything. Let's just recognize that. Breathe a couple of times, I'm writing Vigil right now. Vigil is about vigilante superheroes. So I'm not saying that any of those are bad things, but let's think about the medium itself. Let's think about it as a way that fiction is produced. Then we have the interesting question of, unlike most historical fiction, this has multiple possible social and creative purposes. Mm-hmm. And that's different. So I want to talk. So you see, I'm going to kind of branch out from that idea and investigate what this as an activity is. So I'm less invested in it as a hobby phenomenon of which I'm a member, and a little more interested in it as an activity that has properties. So where that leads me, well, there's lots of things. Maybe sometimes talking about it in pure hobby terms will be important as well. For some other seminar will have many different activities and topics, each with its own title. And so I can always add a chapter onto one of those and invent a new one. A seminar is my place, really, although other people will be participating. In any of these discussions or any of these topics, there is this little semi-forum discussion associated with it. Mm-hmm. So each one of these blocks, which you might think of as a blog post, is going to have its own discussion center in it. So so that goes for seminar as well. Now, nothing at Adept Play is going to be behind a paywall. Mm-hmm. You can go, you don't even have to sign up. You can go and you can look at every single video. You can listen to every single audio. You can read every single word. You can read every single content. You can comment, and you can go to the archive and look up anything. There's no barriers to simple access. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Now, then the last of the three parts is called consulting. And consulting is where, of course, I will be working with people with their games, people who allow me because I like to record the consulting sessions anyway. It turns out to be a very good idea. And so they tend to be very, very dense and very, very high impact. But then people get frustrated if they don't have a recording because they don't remember the part in the middle or something. And I understand that. So recording it would be a good idea anyway. So with a client's permission, I would post some or all of those of whatever portion they're comfortable with, I will post in the consulting section. So it would probably be a little rarer, the posting there, but it is an opportunity for other people to ask questions or to apply those ideas to games they might be playing. By the way, in actual play testing, or published game, I don't care, either one.
Yeah.
And of course, whatever game. I mean, I personally, will play many role-playing games, and so of course my list is a lot more varied than you might expect. So
yeah, it's a misconception to really think that people that funded the indie games and the indie movement and that stuff only plays I don't know, story now games or narrative games.
Right.
It's a misconception.
Well, yeah, it is, and it's also important that that goes into a lot of other topics, and one of the most important, I think, is to acknowledge that the current cliques, clique, the current little groups, in the hobby that we see in the hobby now, they're extraordinarily artificial. And all of them seem utterly ignorant of their own history. I'm shocked that groups, the concept of the word story game, for example, comes from a website that deliberately chose that name because it didn't mean anything. And that's why Andy Kitkowski chose the name Story Games. It didn't have a meaning, and he wanted to have a neutral term that opened it. It got rid of some of the fixed connotations of role-playing game. This was his logic. You can ask him. The term role-playing game tended to be a barrier because if you did something different, somebody would say that's not a role-playing game. So he wanted to get away from that, but he didn't want to go anywhere with it. He didn't want to have any kind of special design in mind. So he said, well, let's call them story games because they make, fiction, and leave it at that. And it will mean nothing. That's great. Everybody will like that. Well, now here we are 10 years later, and everybody thinks a story game has to look like this.
Oh, yes.
And,
it filled with meaning.
And it's who talks to who, and what's kind of interesting, you should also recognize that the Story Games as a site was formed as an alternative to the Forge, and not a very friendly alternative.
No.
Andy and I are friends, but initially it was not formed as an offspring of the Forge, or as an expression of it. And instead, it was built to be a very different kind of space. And in my opinion, it fell into the trap of becoming an inclusion-based activity. And so in many ways, the Story Games movement or community or whatever is almost an anti-Forge. Rather than being an expression of it. Just bear in mind, I never used the term story games. The term was never used at the Forge, and didn't, Andy had a reason for it, which I understand. But the point is that no, story games were not invented at the Forge, or Forge games are whatever. Somebody called me the father of story games a couple of years ago when I met them, and I was horrified. I was like, "You got to be kidding!" I was the person they built, that some people at that site deliberately, or at least, I don't want to say deliberately, in the fullness of time, created an environment that was everything that we weren't. And also had instead of exploding outward in game design, became more and more fixed on specific kinds. So, I have many criticisms from that point forward, but that becomes one of those interviews which I'm trying not to do. Now, if you flip it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In what way? In what way do you think Adept Play is going to have a role in kind of ending those kind of useless clicks, those useless separations?
Well, I can't. Yeah, I can't. I can't obviously run around changing, things that are external to myself. So my plan, just like it was at the Forge, was look, whatever you do somewhere else, this is what we do here. And that's fine. One of my best friends in role-playing and one of the most supportive people and also one of the most imaginative people in role-playing is Jared Sorensen.
Yes.
Now, 20 years ago, it began 20 years ago, but when we met, but a few years later, he would complain about the way RPGNet worked back then. And he complained. He says, it's like monkeys flinging poo all over the place. This is terrible. And then somebody finally said, Jared, I went to RPGNet and I read your posts. You're the worst. You're the worst monkey there. And he said, I know, it's contagious. I can't help myself. And so so the thing I'm saying is that, okay, whatever you do somewhere else, I'm go ahead. That's someone else's problem. But the issue at Adept Play is that no, this is the purposes are very, very simple. There's there's actual play, there's seminar, and there's consulting. Seminar and consulting are progressively more me-centric. This is not like the Forge where I was just the moderator, the co-creator and moderator of a somewhat wide open site in many ways. This is my place. This is very much my place. So, that might be part of it. Another thing is that money is involved. So the current model, and I bet I'm going to have screams of rage because everyone always screams in rage. And then I ask questions. Well, anyway, ask questions is all I can say.
Yeah.
Maybe we will solve that problem. As I said, for simply observing everything, there is no paywall. You do have to register and log in order to comment. And you are limited to one comment per topic. And that's not by day either. For a given post, you get one comment. And that's okay. I mean, it's free. And if you wanted to, I guess, go and comment on every single topic, so that every single topic there you are. There's your one comment, And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But, really, the only thing I have to offer is a certain kind of engagement and a certain kind of social and intellectual focus. That's what I really have to offer as a person in the hobby. That's what I do. It's the one thing that I've got. And according to a number of people, it has some value. To some other people, it has freak value. And then to yet other people, it's an abomination. But okay. But the point is, that's the quality in question. So if you want to have the status, if you want to, that's not the right word. If you want to have the position of commenting as much as you want, on a given thread or on any of the threads, if you want to have that, you pay me $60 and you can do it for 3 months. This is also will be built into the Patreon, so a person could simply take that particular pledge option at the Patreon, and that becomes that payment every month at $20. You could do that. But and there's one other option, that is to pay me $2, and you have that ability for 1 day. So as you can see, it's much cheaper to sign on for the long term. But on the other hand, if you only want to, say multiple things because you hate this so much this 1 day, well then okay, that's $2. And that's it. Oh yes, there are other two things. Consulting services remain at $100, just like they are right now. And to be in a seminar activity, anybody can look at them, anybody can read them, anybody can watch them, whatever. But if you want to sign up for a seminar activity and be part of the recording and the documents and the thing we do, then that is $100 as well.
Okay.
So think of those. Really, it's a little dangerous to use this word because then other words come in. That's kind of like tuition. You know, so just it's a little dangerous, but you know, think of it as a groovy class rather than a, you know, accredited formal university, and that might work. So yeah, go ahead.
So the way I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, this is one of the main purposes, especially on the for the comments, is kind of to keep the comments on track, on focus, and kind of make sure that people who are there really want to be there and have something meaningful to say.
I would say that's a little too high pressure. A person who posts, say, about a game they just played, it may be primarily just enthusiasm. But by doing it, they're opening it up to people saying then, and the reason they would post here rather than anywhere else is that they're opening it up to people saying, well, let's think about that. Let's think about it. That's great that it was fun, and I want to be in it next time. But this is what it was like when I tried that game. We had a terrible time. Why was that? Or this is what it was like to, hey, I had that kind of experience with this other group. Or just to ask, you know, well, what happened, you know, in your little summary there, what happened when this happened? You know, how did the dice work again? I don't understand. And the person says, well, you should see the character sheet. Oh, here, by the way, I've attached the character sheet to the post. You know, so
is it free to post actual plays? You can just post your...
No, to begin a discussion, you have to be signed in with at least with one of the payments. So the idea being that this is the argument is people will ask, why do the content creators have to pay? And I'm saying they are not the content creators. You could put that up on any site you want, and in fact, the recordings are probably going to all be at YouTube or Twitch anyway. So, you know, I'm not saying that this is exclusive, that you get to watch this content here, that it's special, that you get to watch this content here and nowhere else, you know. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the way we talk about it here is the value added for this. So, yes, this is where you buy in. You need to put in a little bit of sunk cost, you know. And I don't think it's onerous. I mean, I cannot do anything like this for free again. I did the Forge for 12 years for free. I ran the Forge booth at Gen Con for 11 years, and not only that, it cost me money every single year. And I helped a lot of people, but it was really a very brutal experience in many ways. I think I've bled enough. I think I've bled enough. And so if it's worth buying a game from somebody, then okay, I'm saying, all right, this is a little bit similar. I think it's value added. And by the way, if you don't think it's value added, you can still look at everything you want and not pay. So I'm not taking anything away from you.
Yeah, the only restricted thing is to post there.
Well, to post a lot.
Yeah.
And also to post a lot is the idea, to continue in a conversation. So it's an unusual model, but I hope people will get used to it. And I also hope that it's not supposed to trap you either. I don't, demand an ongoing payment for the next year. It's not like a health club. It's right. It's not. I'm not going to. And if somebody pays one time and decides whether the kind of interactions they get are worth their time, well, what did they do? They lost $2. How bad is that? So, and it's up to them. So really, that's kind of my take. It's going to. I will be working on Vigil and perhaps America, my other long-running game in design.
I haven't heard about that one.
Oh, okay. Are you familiar with Spione and Shahida?
Spione, the book you brought, right?
Yes. And Shahida
German
is
spy game.
right. Mm-hmm. Shahida is very much like Spione, and it is set in the civil war in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
So those books, there are both books with a small game in the back, and they both concern political moments where global narratives were created. So that's a fancy way to put it. I can only say it that clearly because I've been trying to describe it for 10 years. So after a lot of practice, they are about historical moments when global narratives were created. And so this is the case as well for the militant protests of the United States in the 1970s. I'm particularly focusing on the 1970s because memory of the events in the 1960s are kept, even if they are either demonized or they are romanticized, but they are at least around. You can say the Stonewall riots, you can say Woodstock, you can say the Watts riots, you can say the weather group, you can say any of these things, and people will kind of know what you were talking about, the free speech movement, things like that. But if you reference the things that happened in the 1970s, they are either completely unfamiliar or they are completely distorted. And so I have a very deep background personally in that life. And so it's more personal to me to talk about it. But I am addressing basically the origins of the modern America. When the modern global financial system was established, this is when the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the and related things were invented. This is when the relationship among various nations, particularly the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, were created. This is when Europe altered. There's many alterations throughout the world, and in Latin America and Africa in particular, there were a wide variety of coups and proxy wars which changed the world, completely changed the world. And yet, who knows what the role of Cuban soldiers was in Africa, for example. Now, I can't write about the whole world, but I can write about a microcosm or a certain aspect of that in the United States, because this is the last time that United States citizens attempted to live differently in many cases. So I'm writing I'm writing a book about that, and then there will be a game in it. So it's called America, and it's spelled with a K. So I've
there's a Rammstein song called that's with that name. I don't know if you're aware.
Yeah, that's The Doors. Actually, I think is the one that I'm thinking of, and it's based on a play by Kurt Weill. Am I remembering that correctly? No, oh my God, it goes all the way back. There's another aspect. It goes actually not a play. It goes all the way back to an unfinished novel by Franz Kafka. So there's a long history of that. It was also used in the 1960s and 70s as a reference to what today we would call American Empire.
We have a couple of questions on the chat.
Yes, please.
So one of the most recent ones talking about the Adept play and the payment model and kind of what the service you are paying for is. One of our viewers asked if it will be something, or it could be seen as a way of RPG coaching, in the sense someone who is creating an RPG of their own, who wants to maybe play it, get it out there, get people talking about it, analyzing it. If this could be seen as a service to do that, to get that kind of feedback on your game.
Well, true. Now, what I want to emphasize is that that person can do that on social media wherever they want to, or maybe they have a blog or something. So I would encourage everybody to do that anyway. But the point is that here, yes, what they said is right in that here there is a specific kind of feedback available, and it doesn't necessarily mean a particular ideological approach, but simply that the people there will be attentive and serious and take you seriously. The people there will be attentive to you and take you seriously. I'm not sure you're going to get that necessarily on social media. Somebody else could, you know, retweets what somebody said about what Donald Trump said about what somebody said, and everybody runs over there, and your post for your role-playing game that you just put it 5 minutes ago is lost forever. Nobody's going to find that again. You know, here it will have a certain solid identity and time, and it will have a certain, and you know, yes, people will be attentive, and people will say, I came here, and in many cases I am paying so that I can talk about things like what you just posted. Thank you. And so everybody is paying simply to make it possible for this place to exist. That's it. It's a tip jar. Really, the payments is just tip jars to me.
I think that's one way. Another way of seeing it that I think could be really important to encourage, because at the end, this kind of a space is like really, really, really fucking cool.
Oh, thank you.
At least that's my opinion. And I think, one way of seeing it is you're paying for a service, but the other way of seeing it, and I think personally is the one I care most about, is I want to support this space. I want it to exist and continue existing and that kind of stuff. So I want to pay for it.
That's why I think it does very well as if a person who has that particular approach, they would almost probably be inclined to be already supporting me on Patreon anyway. So therefore, it's the same thing, because the finances of Patreon will be combined. The service that I'm using combines with Patreon seamlessly. So it's the same payment. So it's so that makes a lot of sense. Yes, I mean the whole thing is basically a somewhat more formalized and easier to use enormous Patreon. So that's kind of that's a good way to put it. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to start saying that. So that's very helpful. What any other particular? I'm afraid to ask. What else is on the chat?
We have a couple more. Someone asked you, since you recently moved to 6 months ago, I think, moved to Sweden, and you're now learning Swedish. Someone said that your language you use strongly modifies the way you think, and if you have noticed so far any change in the way you create or play or think about role-playing games because of the new language you're using.
First of all, I'm not good enough at Swedish to think that anything like that could happen. I'm very proud of myself because I got my haircut today in Swedish. Okay? And was able to ask things. I was able to say some basic things. I was able to make a little joke. So if that makes me feel proud of myself, then I don't think that I am yet in that space. Now, it's questionable whether different languages do correlate to different modes of thinking. I'm skeptical about that. It's something that it's a little bit like people talking about, the right and the left side of the brain. It's very popular to talk about, but then when you really look at the science in question, it doesn't say what people think it says. So I'm just being a little picky, maybe a little unnecessarily technical, but let's just go ahead and say yes. Well, maybe if that's the case, then not yet. I imagine that so far anyway, my role playing with Swedes only groups, well, it's kind of an interesting question. It's hard to generalize. The people that I have played with so far are a little bit more, they enter a little bit more into physical role playing at the table, a little more body movement that is more like the character's movement and stuff
More
like that.
like
People do that.
acting.
Well, it's a little less, only a little bit, really, only a little bit. It's not like somebody, it's not like being at a LARP. It's not like being at one of those convention tables where the person pretends they're the pirate because they're playing the pirate character. It's not like that. But it is just a little bit more of that, you know, just like in Italy, you know, it's, there was a very strong tendency for the players. I've been there several times to play there. And there's a strong tendency for the players to describe a lot about what happens because of an action. So there's a lot more kind of description of effects, and I'm kind of listening and going, well, what feels different about this table? And then I realized that was it, but that it was kind of consistent from group to group that I played with. So, but again, I mean, I'm only talking about a limited group of people no matter what. It's just these are the general trends I've noticed so far. But they seem a little stylistic, not really cognitive. So, okay, that's all I can do with the question, I think.
Okay. So another one that is kind of related to the last one, a little bit, is you are a biologist, and our viewer has read a little bit about the Edge of Evolution.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And she's asking how much impact your the kind of the biology mindset, the biology way of things, of seeing things, has had on your games, if any.
Well, that's been asked a couple of times. And I think the first thing to understand is what would be my biological mindset. Because if there's one thing, you know how role players get a little bit irritated when people outside of the hobby think they know what role playing is and think they know how gamers think and think they know, you know, what their perspectives on things might be? Well, the sciences are worse. So if there's an enormous gap between what somebody says, well, the biological perspective is, and what a biologist would say. There's a huge gap. For example, biologists will be the first people to tell you that genes are a component of what develops in a creature, but that they are not what everyone else says a gene is. When someone else says it's genetic, or is angry and says it's not genetic, neither of those meanings have anything, they don't mean anything to a biologist. So if the person is familiar with the book that I wrote, then I say, great, finally I can talk to somebody and answer that question who maybe has some idea of what I mean. I would say that my biological perspective informs everything that I do. And it shows up in a couple of different ways. One, the way it shows up a lot is in my book, Sex and Sorcery. But it also shows up in strange ways. I would say the kind of clinical, almost those game Circle of Hands, which you have, is interesting because it is cold and brutal for much of the text, but it is warmed throughout by referring to the people who have helped me design it through the Kickstarter. So the coldness of it often has to do with things that are biological, or more accurately, are human biology as it is expressed. So a great deal of time I spend on the on the handling of the dead. There's a section there. There's a great deal in there. You might be surprised. In the religious section, there's a lot about the way dead bodies are dealt with. Well, for one thing, this is a game that involves a lot of killing, so it seems to me reasonable to think about that. But also, more importantly, I was influenced by a book, which I referenced in there, which is called The Ritual Disposal of the Deceased, which is a very anthropological title. But if you read the book, you will find that that person has an extensive background in behavioral biology and really is one of the best books about the human as an ecological creature, and is really very, very good. And so I taught a class which used that book extensively, and it stuck with me. It had an impact on me. And so when I was writing Circle of Hands, I often thought of what I was writing as a chapter or as an example in that book. So, there are lots of intersections. You may be familiar with my blog, where I intersect politics, comics, and autobiography all the time. All the time. Just history, me, the comics of the time, comics that I've just read, whatever. But they all come together, and I will switch across them all the time. He's just bam, 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 just talking about it. So it is a unified essay, but there are these different angles that I'm striking at all the time through it. Well, that's what biology is like for me with everything. Cool. So yeah, it does quite a bit.
So one thing we kind of forgot to talk about before we were talking about the different sections is that for the seminar, one of the things you have said is that in the future you are thinking about taking all of that and producing a book.
Oh, that's right. Yes. The way I'm looking at it at the moment is what would be called a living document, which is to say that you are building a set of ideas and its organization as you go along. And so in the end, or maybe not even in the end, but at a given point, you might extract a section and make a fixed document out of it. So yes, that I think is one of the overt goals. So if there were the ones that I have in mind, one would be, I guess you would call it, you wouldn't title it this, but what it is would be a phenomenology of role-playing, which is just what it is. Another one might be something I've been working on for a long time, on and off, called Finding D&D, which is to address Dungeons and Dragons uniquely as a religion. And that's not a joke.
I mean,
it's not a joke. And it's not like the old cult accusation at all. That's not what I mean. I mean literally a religious attitude toward this item.
I think that's not that weird at all. Like, just recently I saw a conversation about between big figures in the D&D community. One of the creators of the latest edition, said that the way they thought about D&D when they did the 5th edition was that D&D is not a game, it is a culture. So I think that's
right.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And I also think that it is, well, it's a little bit like Jesus, isn't it? Either it existed long, long, long ago in a golden age, a golden moment that we will never recapture again, or it's coming someday, someday they'll get it right, it'll come, or it's here in your heart. Now, you wouldn't say that about any other role-playing game. You wouldn't say that about any other role-playing game. You wouldn't say it about, no matter how much you liked it. No one will ever say those things about Sorcerer. It's just an instrument. It's like a trumpet. It's like a saxophone. It's like, it's a cool instrument, and it plays a certain way. But you play your music on it, right? That's what Sorcerer is. I take great pride in it as an instrument. But it's never going to have that particular approach. It cannot, because it is what it is as a utility object. But so nobody will ever say that about any other role-playing game, no matter how much they love it. There may be certain tendencies in that direction regarding RuneQuest or Glorantha. There may be certain tendencies in that direction toward a couple of others, but they are not considered in the same way. Basically, as a role player, I am expected to have an opinion about a given edition of D&D. I'm expected.
Yeah.
I mean, and you should. Why wouldn't you? It's, and so it's kind of an interesting question. Well, nobody would say, but that's just another role-playing game. Why is it important that a new edition of D&D comes out ever?
Yeah, it's in our culture. It's like if you haven't played D&D,
or another thing,
you haven't played like the basics of our hobby.
Well, that's the interesting point. Is that the case, though? Is the content of, first of all, which D&D? Because there are not only, at least 9 different items that I can point to as the core for that name, but not, and I mean 9. I didn't make that up. There are at least 20 things that, if you broaden the publisher out a little bit, do qualify. So the question is, okay, is there a common thread throughout all of them? Is there an orthodoxy, a line that actually runs through those or not? And second, is there a fundamentalism? Is there, as you say, a fundamental quality to this activity called role-playing that was captured somewhere in D&D, or maybe it was captured and has been lost, or maybe it is coming in the future, or maybe it's here in our heart. Yeah. You see that? The analogy starts getting a little disturbing after a minute. Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but I'm not doing this as a disturbing criticism. I think this kind of attitude toward things is a normal human activity. Any group gets like this about something, if that makes any sense, right? So I'm actually a little sympathetic. I'm not being contemptuous, but I want to investigate it as a phenomenon. And do I have hundreds of pages written with interviews by creators of different kinds of D&D already? Yes, I do. So yes, that's a topic for seminar. So you see, that's another example. And there are a couple of others. There's, let me think about what else would be. I have a list. Of course I have a list. There's, yeah, I mean, I'll just get going on them, and you will see what the topics are, as I post the beginning of each one and continue to work on them. Obviously, the ones that will get the most attention are the ones that people sign up for activities. That makes sense. But I'm not going to be too rigid. If I really feel like working on one anyway, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by a living document. I don't really have a schedule or one fixed thing that I need to get out as a product. You'll notice that there's a big de-emphasis on product. You can buy my games there. But I'm not. You know what? I have published 9 role-playing games and several auxiliary books of different kinds. I really want to just have people have fun playing those. Yeah. I mean, before I put all the effort into full-on publication, really, does the world need another one of my games when I think that Troll Babe, Slay With Me, Shahida, Spione, Circle of Hands, Sorcerer, Elves, it was a mutual decision. When each one of those, I would love to see multiple groups playing right now and telling me what they think. I'd much rather put effort into that and have sales, if any, come from that rather than trying to get frenzied about something new. I'm pretty sick of something new. I don't know about you. I'm really, and I don't mean something new like in something novel, like a new idea. I love new ideas. I'm talking about new products. Oh boy, I'm supposed to get excited because somebody is putting out new products. Does that sound a little bit like a captive or infantilized audience to you? Because it kind of seems like that to me. So, yeah, I'm perfectly happy for people to buy my games, but that's not going to be, the focus on I'm a role-playing publisher and I'm going to keep publishing role-playing just like rock and roll people have to keep making new albums. I don't really want to do that.
Well, that's the capitalism talking, right?
Well, I suppose. Commerce, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has its roots on capitalism. So the products, this kind of thinking, right, about the products.
Well, let's see. If we take the the quality theory of value, that something has value because it's good, right? Which is to say, if it's good, people may pay money for it. There's nothing too intrinsically, maybe it's not like the whole theory of value, but what I said just then isn't that bad, but people flip it so that if you pay money for it, it must be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, it can't be shit. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think there's something wrong there.
I have some examples. I don't really want to talk here. Yeah.
Well, I want to, it's kind of a good question, and I don't have a set idea of how much I think a role-playing game is worth as commerce anyway. I don't have a set value in my mind, so I can't really go further from there. But let's see. Edgar, did you have some questions that you wanted to ask that you didn't get a chance to say, maybe?
Yeah, I want to revisit one concept that you want to bring back from the first days of the Forge, this concept of color. Could you explain it?
Yes, and in my effort, I'm not giving up on all that jargon, but I'm making it a personal effort, a desire on my part, in fact, to talk about it in ordinary language as much as I can. So seminar, for example, will have, it's ordinary language. People who liked the way we talked at the Forge about these things, you'll easily see where you could put the terms, but you know what? They serve their purpose.
Yeah.
And now I can just talk about them in an ordinary way. So that said, color, as we used it, let's speak about it in ordinary terms. I think that when I look at a character sheet, even if it has no picture on it, and I know the game, and I made that character, or somebody who has some similarities to me has made that character and handed it to me, I look at it and I say, I feel it. I'm feeling this. Look at this. I can do this. I think of it as kind of a vivid engagement with what this could be in imaginative terms, right? It's vivid. It's got your parts of your brain are activated. Parts of your sense of, if you want to be metaphysical, parts of your sense of beauty is activated, if you want to talk that way. So when that happens, it's just potential. It's like holding something up high and saying it has potential energy, right? Because now it could fall, but it's not. So then we play, and the question is whether the way we play and what happens. So there you are, system and fiction, right?
Yeah.
The way we play and what happens, whether it fulfills the promise of that in vividness, of that feeling. And then when things change, the sheet, when we are done playing, it's not the same sheet, is it?
No.
No, I mean, I like to say role-playing is how one character sheet makes a new character sheet. And so, it doesn't apply to all games that don't have character sheets or whatever, but, it's a pretty good idea. So thinking about those changes, and maybe not just to the character, but to the setting, or to the more subtle things about the characters, not just how injured they are, but what maybe their new social status or who their friends are now or something like that. Where they are, right? Now we are imagining something new. All these things have changed. Have they changed in a way that is its own new level of excitement about what we could do or happiness about what we did? And if that's the case, then we can talk about successful play. It's kind of synonymous with fun. You're glad you did it.
Yeah.
And even if you never play this game again, maybe it was a one-shot, you're glad you did it and could see yourself doing it again, or telling somebody that maybe they would want to do it. Or if it's an ongoing game, by the time the new session is underway or is about to happen, you are ready. You have this new sheet, which technically you really have never played before. Even if it's just one mark on it, you haven't played this sheet before, and the vividness that is came out of play itself. It was caused by what happened in play, how you did it, and what you imagined with other people.
So the color is the premise of the game throughout the cycle of the play itself?
I'm talking about it a little bit more internally, but I'm also talking about the way we talk when we play. So I'm not talking about these very, very elaborate descriptions of things, because that's kind of anti what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I am saying that when I talk about my character doing something and the other person at the table reacts because they appreciate that, they know my character and say, yes, that's so her. Or they would say, well, if you do that, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Because they were listening and they have incorporated what you said, and it becomes a piece of what they have just provided. Sometimes the statements are judgmental or out of character, like that's so her. Other times they are very descriptive of a new action, or they said, it doesn't matter. They all contribute in this way. And so when that becomes a reliable piece of play that nobody's really trying to do, and remember, it doesn't have to be constant. We don't all have to be self-hypnotized to do this. And many of the comments are being made very out of character. You know, maybe it's just somebody says, aha, you know, nice shot. Maybe makes a sound effect, you know, of my character's sword hitting somebody, and then claps my shoulder as they go up to get another drink.
How you will try to measure that in this project?
First of all, we can simply call attention to it as the phenomenon of interest. Number one. And you'll notice that I'm not saying anything that people don't already say about music.
Yeah.
Right. So, and in many ways, it's no more than what you might say about a really well-played card game where people are having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really not an unusual phenomenon, but we are applying it to the creative production of fictional content. That's kind of fucking cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? I don't think anybody really has thought about this. I think I've been looking at what academics are saying about role-playing, and it's a little bit like what academics say about movies. You want to say, have you ever watched any? You know, and it's kind of like, that's all very pretty and everything, your little distinction between games and toys and your little chit-chat about this and that, but I haven't seen you play Troll Babe. I haven't seen you do this. You know, I'd like to get a little, you know, I think you need to kind of get your hands dirty here. And so, you know, there's the biologist for you, for the person who asked about biology. Yes, it's all well and good. Now, open up that cat, please.
Oh, we say the same thing in programming. We say, okay, that's all good, but show me the code.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So it's in this case, I'm trying to get at this in a celebratory way that is also intelligent. The intelligent approach increases the celebration. The celebration, which includes doing it, increases the topics that we can address. So this is the idea. So color, or this vividness or intensity of interaction and delivery, is one of the primary variables. In a way, if that doesn't happen, well, it's good that it's not guaranteed. Because if you were, for example, playing music in some fashion that guaranteed the music would happen no matter what you did, I don't call that playing music.
Yeah.
So I agree that there has to be a failure state, just like there is in any creative endeavor. There has to be, or even a gaming endeavor like the game of cards. There has to be a failure state, that we couldn't play the game, or we fucked up the rules, or or this person was whatever, something. But so there has to be a failure state, and I get that. So I'm interested in when we achieve the state, and I don't think it's very hard. It's a little bit like the myth of the perfect game. Great gamers can have great fun with games, but nobody else can.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, no, I really think this is an ordinary behavior. I don't know how common it is. In my experience, especially in the old days, it really wasn't that common. But on the other hand, I don't think that's a matter of I don't think that's because of the range of capability. As we used to observe at the Forge all the time, the people who were the best at doing this and helping this happen, they were the people who were not the most self-identified role-playing experts. They tended to be people who were who often were at role-playing tables, but only because, or they would say only because their spouse was at the table. But if you look, they're the ones who are the most capable of that effect, both of feeling it and of delivering and helping it. And the same goes for people who have not role-played, but are attending a role-playing game perhaps, or watching for the first time, and it's really a lot of fun, and they start jumping around and excitedly talking as if they were playing, even though they don't have a character. And these are the people that I would like, in the long run, ultimately to be talking to. I don't know if that's possible, but ultimately it is the skill that they seem to have that often is absent or very poor in people who will tell you all about what a big gamer they are, what a big role player they are.
What do you think is that?
So, yeah. I have some friends who are working on that topic for their PhDs.
Okay.
Or they are professors whose students are working on them for PhDs. And if I try to analyze, I mean, isn't it interesting? We have interesting subcultural phenomena that are occurring across different cultures, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is geekdom transnational? Right? And or is that a matter of American hegemony over pop culture? And so I would just start with that question, and I would go get a PhD on that first. You know, go figure that out for me, and then maybe we'll have some data or some perspective to talk about that, because it's such a big question. And all I can do is say, good question. I wish I were, you know, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
But and everybody has their little rants about their interaction with geekery, nerdery, gaming, or certain kinds of science fiction and fantasy. You know, I think Angel in particular, I think you know that I have a lot of criticisms of what happened to science fiction and fantasy. But you know, there's so many different things to talk about with that we would be here for several more hours, and I'm not an expert. I only would be asking the questions. So, sorry, I'm getting myself a little bit rearranged there. Okay. So, any other chats or anything like that? Troublemakers?
Not yet. But one thing we could talk now for could be your new game. To change a little bit of topic. To your new game, Vigil, which you are playtesting now. I've got to read a little bit. Could you first do the quick pitch, the elevator pitch of Vigil?
Well, this is embarrassing because it's right after I said that new product is not my priority, right? I mean, it's, you know, and so it's I'm trying to find the right way to say it. I wrote Vigil because I was blogging and am blogging about comics, and one of the kinds of comics characters that I have never been happy with, but I have always found compelling, but I have also been very critical about or upset that they get popular, is the superhero vigilante. Which is related to levels of, almost by definition, as levels of violence, completely, questions or challenges the role of superhero and law enforcement. Now, these are all kind of good things to do, and in many ways, and you should know that this first appeared in 2 steps. It appeared with Denny O'Neil's Batman, and it wasn't just Denny O'Neil, actually. It was a number of writers, Archie Goodwin, Frank Robbins, Steve Englehart, and Denny O'Neil especially. But he made Batman, he tried to get Batman back into the 1930s and 40s, but he did it before the Comics Code chain was altered. The Comics Code authority was altered in the early 1970s, but he did it before then. So that meant he had to retain Batman was anti-gun. So here you are trying to get Batman back to a phase where if you look at Batman in 1939, he's carrying a fucking gun. And you're trying to get back to that, but you have to preserve this post-1940 thing. 1940 is when DC adopted its internal code. And that became the Comics Code Authority over 10 years later. And so after that point, Batman was, they made Batman a completely different character and turned him into a funny character eventually. And the idea was that that he was totally anti-gun. So here Denny O'Neil is trying to write a dark, vigilante-driven, traumatized creature of the night, anti-superhero who, for some reason, is anti-gun. So you have that comes in. So the whole ambiguity of Batman, the entire history of Batman ever since, has been due to that structural artifact of those 2 policies colliding. DC writers have been trying to make sense of this ever since, and part of the strength of the character is that they never can. So then you have, just 2 years later, after the Comics Code Authority was altered, then Jerry Conway invents the Punisher. Well, now we are off. No, the rest of the story is written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Danny O'Neil becomes the editor on Daredevil over at Marvel with a young writer named Frank Miller.
Yeah.
So it's not just Frank Miller. Danny O'Neil is still a big part of this.
Yeah.
And we could go on and on. Danny O'Neil oversees, he's also the editor for Moon Knight. He is also he also is later, he reverses Steve Ditko's question into a character who's kind of the opposite of the original. So his presence is there, and then you have other creators who are all engaged in this. So all these, by the late 1980s, you cannot turn around without hitting a new hero who's unshaven and has a gun and is completely traumatized and is running around shooting bad guys, and this is good. So it's very tricky. Is this a right-wing thing? Is this about, and they're all white men except for 2 characters who had the same title. Everybody else is a white man. Everybody else is middle class. The ones who began ethnic, like the Punisher, who became extremely Italian because he was ripped off from a series of paperbacks, The Executioner. But so he's extremely Italian in the 1970s. By the middle of the 1980s, they give him a stupid last name, Castle, that he never had before. And and you're like, what? Castle? Who? Him? And then, and also they make him look as Anglo-Saxon as you can possibly look. And so, so that all of these characters by this point are becoming extremely middle class, and even Batman, although he's supposed to be rich, never acts rich. So there's this, there's all this kind of interesting thing going on, and so you're looking at this phenomenon. You were thinking, is this the Reagan Revolution? I mean, are we all Bernie Goetz now? You guys know, you know who Bernard Goetz was, right? The guy who, it was a very famous case where, which seems kind of trivial. Well, not trivial. It seems kind of ordinary now, sadly. But he was a person who hated riding the New York subway, and he was harassed, he says, and was, and he took, one day he took a gun and shot people. And this was in the late 80s, and he became a hero to many people for shooting the bad guys that we don't like to see on our subways. So is that what this is about? That's kind of disgusting. But then again, you look at the people who did the best work, and Denny O'Neil is a good one. Steve Gerber is another. He invented the Fool Killer in the 1970s, and he rewrote a Fool Killer limited series in about 1990 that was incredible. So all of these people did not have those politics. They were not, and if you really read the books, they are not really coming from that perspective. So the politics are very difficult. I decided to have a debate about this with one of my friends who wrote the Dark Champions source book and game for Hero Games and romanticizes the vigilante a lot. And he and I have always disagreed on this. And I was an old Champions player. We were in the same fanzine for Champions. I don't know if you knew that, me and Steve Long. And so we only realized that later, actually. But the point is that he and I really disagreed about the politics of superheroes, and we really came down in different perspectives about a lot of things. But we're friends, and we always like to talk to each other because we like the way we disagree. So we always met every year at the conventions, and we would always run away from everybody else and have these intense conversations about this or that difficult character or gaming and things. And so I said, now that I have this blog, Steve, I want to have a debate with you. We'll both write columns, and we'll both include a reply in the column. And so we did it. We did it for, I think it's 15 posts or something like that. And it's really extensive. And we did the whole history. We did the whole history of the comic book vigilante. And then we went back and dug up the Shadow and the Spectre and the Spider. And we really worked it over. And I think we ended up with what really amounts to a powerful, powerful text, written through the lens of two people who kind of had different ideas on why they liked it, that worked out really well. And you know what? It's like a curse. It is a curse. I have referred to it before. This is a personality disorder. That now that I did this, I got an idea for writing a role-playing game that brought out those topics that we talked about. And not only that, but I knew there was a game an Ashcan only, that had been produced in 2007 that I always carry around and I play it a lot, that would be perfect. Maybe not out of the box because it was not a finished game anyway, but maybe if I kept playing this setting or these ideas with it and I kept tweaking the rules, it would turn into a game design project. And it did. So I got the author, Ram Hall, who wrote The Path of Journeys. I got his permission to use his game as my starting point for my game. And it's gone really, really well. But as I say, this is a personality disorder. This is not a normal. I do not know. I will tell you, I've said this before in some interviews, but I will tell you again. In 1999, all I wanted to do, I swear to God, all I wanted to do was to finalize Sorcerer in PDF form. And that would go for Sorcerer's Sword, Sorcerer and Sword, and the Sorcerer's Soul. I would get them settled down in their PDF form. People could pay me for them if they wanted for the rest of my life. And that's all I wanted to do. That was it. That's all. And that's all I ever wanted to do as a publisher. It would be painless. I would never have to print anything. I would collect a few pennies every so often. Win-win for everybody. You get the great games. And yeah, I was done. And so this is all I really wanted to do. And I will do this Forge thing and enjoy my games and everyone else's games. And so, hooray! Right?
Yeah.
But if only somebody had given me the right medication at this time, I could have done it. I could have done it, but no. Vincent puts it very nicely, Vincent Baker, and I completely agree with him. He says that they get in his head and they torment him. He is tormented. It is uncomfortable. It is distracting. it is enraging, and it's like the worst of a puzzle and a trap.
Yeah.
And you can't stop thinking about the color. The color won't leave you alone because the color is demanding to find expression in these terms. And it's not terms of just quantifying them, not just giving them strength ratings like some bullshit like that. No, it's quantifying them to become instruments of creativity for others. And he says he just writes the game to get them out. It's self-protection. It's just self-protection. You write it to get it out of your head.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. I have had my life ruined by this on multiple occasions. And so
it's obsessive,
so right now,
right?
with Vigil,
when you are
it is.
Yeah, when you're making a game, it feels like you are having an obsession. You want to write about it. You can't stop thinking about it.
That's right. That's right. And people keep distracting you with nonsense too, like jobs and stuff.
And then, and real life and that.
Yeah. Right. And then also, this is important for me, I tend to think on multiple vectors at once. Mm-hmm. And so, therefore, I'm happy if I am working on several projects. I'm preparing this game for play. Maybe it's it's a published game, someone else's game, but we're going to play it sometimes next week, so I'm preparing for that. At the same time, I'm working on this other game. On the same time, I'm working on a less developed form of some other game. I'm never working on one game. I always have 6 or 7 proto games at any given time. I always have. So it doesn't matter. One thing I'm doing, though, is I'm relaxing the need to publish. I just want to back off and be the intermediate form, the less severe form of the disorder. Right? The severe form means you have to publish it.
Yeah.
And okay, maybe what I mean by publish is just a very nice, usable PDF. I want to go just that far, and not on a schedule. That's where I want to be. So that's what Vigil's going to be like.
How do you
think?
But
to talk a little more about Vigil, yeah. Okay, so go ahead. Yeah.
How do you think having a space like the Forge back in the day and now Adept Play affects you, that disorder? Does it make it worse? Is another way to let it out?
That's right. Maybe they should take it away from me. You know, it's only he's getting worse. I don't know. I'm sorry, Mrs. Edwards. He's getting worse.
But it's a way of group therapy. It's the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? Well, there's an important point. The Forge was dedicated. Its primary mission was to promote independent ownership of your role playing, independent ownership of your design. That's what it was there for. In 1999, that was considered ridiculous, amateurish, unprofessional, counterproductive, and in that it ruins the hobby. It let the monkeys into the hobby. The hobby should be left to the noble people, you know, and you should not, you know, jump yourself up. How dare you, you know, do that? Well, so I had a very different idea. I'm an anarchist, and I say, no, fuck you. I will make my own comics, and I will sell them on the street corner. Thank you very much. And so, and that was the attitude of the Forge. It was based on the independent comics of the middle 90s, which said, you know what, we actually make better comics, and we can do this. We can do it. And so that's really what the Forge was for. Now this is normal. This is an acknowledged way to publish. There are people who consider themselves, some people who consider themselves opposed to the legacy of the Forge, who exemplify its every ideal with every single thing they do. And that's because they are self-publishers and they are driven by their own developed sense of color at the table, and they are designing toward it. Now, many of them do have roots in the Forge. They just keep quiet about it. And then some of them just don't know because they learned it at secondhand, that self-publishing was the way to do this. And so a great deal of the OSR is a new Forge. And a lot of people who call themselves oh, I just skin D&D, right? I just skin D&D. I've read their games. I've played a lot of their games. Those are new games. Maybe it helps them to think of themselves as still loyal to D&D when they do this. Maybe that's just part of it. And the energy of being part of that tradition is certainly a source of energy, of motivation and excitement. That's great. But that doesn't stop the fact that they are self-publishers writing their own games, and in many cases making decisions about how the rules will work that are nothing but system does matter. They're absolutely exemplifying the system does matter issue. And so, yes, long live the Forge.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so because that's, so really the group that, at least in part, considers itself anti-Forge really is literally the heir, the inheritor. And then the group that many people think of as the ongoing Forge is actually the anti-Forge that slid apart from it for a reason. So, you know, it's a very strange state of affairs to be sitting back here and feeling gaslighted by everybody.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The OSR movement is a really interesting movement because I do see that kind of principles being simplified in them, and they do. It's a really interesting design space, and yeah, I think more than like the big established names like the big games, they do exemplify the ideas of system matters, even if for them a big part of the system is the adventure. But that's also part of the.
But even those, but those adventures from game to game are not the same.
Yes, they introduce.
I mean, there's a belief that these games, that OSR games, are compatible, but that's only that's due to some kind of like mental gymnastics at the table. If you actually play, say, I'm going to play this game. If I play Dungeon Crawl Classics, if I play Lamentations of the Flame Princess, if I play Black Box Hack or something like that, they're pretty different play experiences. Yeah. And so, you know, and I celebrate that. I say, fantastic. You know what? Playing, you know, Holmes, D&D by J. Eric Holmes from 1997 is a very different play experience than playing, you know, the 3.0, for example. These are, and not just in time, not just the 23 years of difference, but they are different phenomena. And that's fine. So, you know, I don't care if I don't romanticize the through line of some kind of golden Dungeons and Dragons that runs through it all. So I'm okay with them being very different from one another, and go ahead and be romantic about it if that's part of what makes you write a game. That's great. So, so yeah, it's kind of an interesting position. People will actually apologize to me when they meet me because they say, well, yeah, but I like a lot of the OSR. And I'm like, well, why on earth are you saying that? What on earth does that have to do with me? You know, James Malazewski was an admirer of Sorcerer and Sword, and it helped inspire him to work on Grognardia. Jeff McKinney was heavily influenced by Sorcerer and even wrote Sorcerer rules into his early efforts. That's the guy who did Carcosa later. Raphael Chandler, who is an OSR illustrator across multiple works and has done a work of his own in that regard. His first published game was developed at the Forge. And these are, I could go on and on. There are many examples. Fight On, considered one of the seminal publications of the origin of the OSR. Before he founded that magazine, where did he start talking about role-playing again? Where did he learn about the diversity of role-playing? Where did he learn about this? And his name's Sean Calafina, I should say, is the way he is known. And he was a Forge participant. So, you know, these are direct roots. These are not just, I'm not making it up. And then of course there's the whole DIY, do-it-yourself thing in the first place, which before the Forge was considered very marginal and was directly what's the word I want? It was directly combated by anybody who Well, so you would find that if you wanted to go and get into role playing and talked about publishing your own game, it's the first thing everybody told you not to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's not the case anymore. So, so yeah, I mean, it's I didn't want to quite go on this for so long, but the thing I'm trying to get at is that there's a lot of room here for a lot of fun talking about play that is based on the unique enjoyment and the unique production of material that it has. And I just hope that the site can show that. I mean, it's, say what you will, but you're going to see me playing, who knows what. I don't know if it's going to be, I mean, you'll see me playing every game that I feel like playing. And I don't care if the author hates my guts for some who knows what reason. And I don't care if the author never heard of me. And I don't care if the author never heard of Adept Play. I'm interested in playing their game, I'll do it. And I encourage everybody to take that approach to all of them. At least when they're there, that's the attitude. I don't care what you say outside of here, play what you want, let's all talk about it. So hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah,
really got going on that
does.
one. Yeah. Okay. And ask me anything you want. If you want to embarrass me or make it tough for me, that's okay. If you want to, or if you've decided that we're all worn out now, whatever you want.
One question I do have is, why have you decided to start or create Adept Play now? What was the reason of that need, of that desire?
Well, it's very clear to me why. I've been wanting to move with my family to Sweden and to live in this town, Norrköping, and where my wife has extensive family and where she partly grew up, and where I have visited for years and years and years, and where my children who have been brought up to speak Swedish and they're citizens have been coming, and they knew their great-grandfather here, and so I've been meaning to do this for a long time. Well, now that we are here, what am I going to do? I was in academia for 25 years. I was a professor for 15 years. And I don't really feel the urge to do that. Career academia, I think I have done what I wanted to do. And I wrote The Edge of Evolution. I'm very excited about that. I think it's a very good book. I'm proud of it. And I did my evolution blog for a long time, and I thought it was pretty good too. Hopefully I will get back to that one of these days. But I don't want to be a career biology academic anymore. So what will I do with myself? Well, the question is whether I can make a reasonable business identity out of what I think is the value added that I can bring to role-playing. Not to save the hobby, not to make the hobby great, not to fix the hobby or anything like that, but to say, well, are there people out there who find my participation to be value added, and in what way? And so this is the idea I came up with. Mm. So yes, I want to have some but it has to be an income. It doesn't have to be big, but it needs to be a thing, Mm-hmm. Nobody is paying me to blog about role playing or comics. Well, actually my patrons are, but not very much. No, nobody is paying me as an employer, right? I don't have a business identity. A number of people right now who are considered opinion makers are in fact paid by other interests to take a particular perspective on their topic. And I'm not saying everybody who's paid to blog or whatever is a bad person or saying bad things, but I am saying that I'm not in that position. So therefore, I also have proven, despite being gainfully employed in academia, I have also proven to my own satisfaction that I am a rotten employee. And I'm an excellent teacher, and I love the science, and I was a great colleague for anybody if we were working on something cool together. But in terms of being a worker at the workplace with the work culture and the administrative culture, no, I was a huge pain in the ass to everybody for 25 years. Ask anybody. And so, you know, that's so, you know, maybe it's just better for everybody if I stay self-employed. And so, so that's a big part of it. Moving to Sweden, and also the nature of the finances here are so different and so positive. I don't have to worry about a job for purposes of insurance like you do in the States. And in the States, that's not insurance, that's basic health care. Right? Everybody else, they say insurance. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about access to healthcare services at all.
Yeah.
So there are so many things that are connected up like that that I don't have the option to be unemployed responsibly. Here I can take the risk of starting up this business and sinking some investment into it. They have a program called Ni Företagarcentrum, which is basically the business startup, the new business center, and the new company center. And the idea is it's a startup. It's a venue for startups. It's a whole bunch of office space. A lot of it is open and a lot of it is closed. You can rent the closed spaces. You can use the closed spaces on a sign-up basis, or you can actually rent a real office in there. There's free coffee, free breakfasts. There's Wi-Fi. There's activities. People schedule talks and stuff like that. There are mentor programs that you can get into. And it's all about just getting your business off the ground, building your business plan, getting it approved by the city, and you have to have a very, very technical budget to do that, very carefully built business plan to do that. And so I work at Ni Företagarcentrum. I have my business plan and my projects submitted to Arbetsförmedlingen, which is the sort of the government work, you know, bureaucracy. And I have, you know, basically gotten myself involved with all of that. So I go to work every day. I go to work, you know. I go to the workplace and I set up my things and I have my things I need to do that day and I get them done. I have tons of footage already shot for seminar, for example, presentations. And yesterday, Angel, you would be proud of me. I took your advice on the equipment and I went off to Media Markt and I went and I bought a ton of shit. I bought cameras. I bought microphones, I bought a new laptop which is going to work, unlike this thing which needs to be taken out into the backyard and shot. And then I have my things. I can now edit my movies better. So I am ready to go. I am the next stop, more actual play. Next stop, cool footage to watch for seminar, for consulting, and for the actual play section. And you know, next stop, plenty of content, plenty of things for people to find to talk about when they get there. The people on the Patreon will be let in first, of course, and they get to play there for a while. And so then when it is opened up, then other people will see what we are doing and have a bit of a, you know, a bit of a grounding, so they're not just walking around in an empty space. And a lot of what I've been doing at the Patreon, playing a specific game, I think a very productive game, Cold Soldier by Brett Gillan, playing that with multiple people. and reflecting on the different things that have happened and the insights from that extremely clean design, and other and Vigil, of course, I've been developing. I've been presenting in very, very bad draft form. It's terrible to watch releasing. I usually don't release my drafts because you can tell they are crap. There are whole sections that exist only in my head, and they are not going to get in there until after the next round, and it's just embarrassing. But you know, I'm sort of exposing it a little bit more to the light. So yeah, those activities at the Patreon are going to become much more socially accessible and more of a multi-participant thing at Adept Play.
By the way, a quick question:
yes?
Do we have a release date, more or less?
Well, my session with my web design person last night solved the problems that I considered to be fatal. So all the things left on our list are all things that each of us looked at each other and said, oh, I can do that. And it was easy, as opposed to the older problems, which were, how are we ever going to do this? This is impossible. So we have got to the point where now we are fixing and finishing rather than drowning in the pit we are digging for the foundation. So I would say that I cannot give you a real date, but I would like to open it up to the Patreon people. Oh, I don't know, maybe as soon as mid-December. Maybe, but I don't know. It will be there will be some crappy pieces if I do that. But it should work okay. And so, or maybe for a pre-release thing where whatever happens is going to be scrubbed while it's still a sandbox, you know, not connected to anything, and still just a model. And people, that way we can find out what breaks, you know, which is important if various functions don't work. But those are planned for December. That phase is, you know, maybe not immediately, not tomorrow, but December is when I want to get that going. And then there's also what else? Oh, there was something else I was going to talk about too. Oh well, but yes, that's my hope.
So I don't know if Edgar has any other question. I have one last.
No.
Edgar first, poor guy.
No, I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
My last question will be: we have talked about color in games and that idea, that image that we have of a game before we start playing. And if you applied that to Adept Play, with the idea that you have in your mind of Adept Play, the color of Adept Play, what is the part of it that you are most excited about? The part of it that you are like, man, I wish I was doing that right now. What's the thing that you are more excited about?
It's for all of those three things, of course. But you know, the logo. You have seen the logo. I actually use it for my consulting right now. It's ANP, but it's put together like an eye, and it is this burning eye. It's like the eye of Sauron. And it is saying, now it is time to look. Or perhaps you could even say, don't look away. You know, or even, this is the other. It is looking back at you. Is that a bad thing? You know, because you're opening yourself up in this place for other people to see you playing, perhaps, right? You're opening yourself up. You're saying, I am posting seriously here. Maybe not seriously in the sense that you will now smiling. That's not what I mean. You are posting authentically here. That's a little risky. People are looking at you, aren't they? Well, yes, they are. That's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I'm excited about. I'm excited to the slight discomfort, but also the intimacy of these connections. I've been having that experience with my consulting. I had that experience with some of my convention visits last year and this year. I've had that experience with getting together with people to play for fun. And I've seen it happen for other people. I think that this is something that perhaps at the Forge, with so much going on, so many different forums, and such an emphasis on, I could design too, you know, and such and the auxiliary things like the contests that were created there and migrated elsewhere, like Iron Game Chef and things like that. The various other things, the Forge booth, you know, I think that's why I want to get back to this one thing that I just described. I want to get, and so it does apply to consulting, it does apply to seminar, and it does apply to actual play, but those three things are a lot more alike than they first may seem. They are each very, very close to the other two. So, so really, you know, it's, the eye remains the same, the glare, you know. So yeah, I'd say that's the most important.
Great. So yeah, for those of you out there, I encourage you that if you want to look at this and if you want to see this and want to be seen, and if you dare to be seen, I encourage you all to check out the Ron's Patreon account, which is probably the easiest way right now of getting all these cool things before anyone else, and to be on the lookout for all this, for the new page and for all the news. Yeah, other than that, thanks a lot, Ron, for being with us today.
I really, really appreciate it. There's one last thing I want to say.
Yeah.
Which is that I can't do it now, but eventually what I want to do is to at least make some way, indirectly or directly, of having non-English speaking participation at Adept Play. You know, for the Spanish, for example, is the most widely spoken language on the planet. And so it is spoken across more cultures, and it is spoken across more regions as a native language. And it is so, and I know that the role-playing culture in Spanish is very rich. I remember at Gen Con one year, two guys came up, and they were so excited when I could understand them and we could talk a little bit in Spanish, and they had their game design and everything, and they didn't know how to get published, and so, but it was fantastic. And I said, this is terrible. Why should English dominate the hobby? Why, you know, this is terrible. Why, you know, there's the Scandinavian and more generally Northern European scene is very rich with both its LARPing history, but also tabletop role-playing. So many of them were written here in the 1980s and today as well. I see games that I've never heard of here. And not the big ones that get translated into English, but others that have never been translated into English. And the same goes, and then I go to Italy a lot and do role-playing activities there, and people keep designing games, and they keep doing it in English. And I'm saying, why aren't you doing this in Italian? Why aren't you drawing upon yourselves as people living here and making it available to people near you with this? And so I would really like to have actual play include multiple languages. Now, how we could do that in the long run, you know, will I make enough money to pay such things as translators or not? Maybe somebody else will take on that responsibility and organizing. But whatever it is, I don't know how to do it yet, but that will be one of my future ideals.
I think that's just...
That will be really great, yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That I would love to see that happen. I would love to see, because
yeah,
there's
Japanese. There's a huge Japanese culture in role-playing design. right? And the I have so many Arabic-speaking friends. I have a lot of friends here, in the States and elsewhere. People who live in Jordan. People. I mean, I have lots of people who live in Lebanon. I have friends here in Scandinavia whose native language is Arabic, and to encourage role-playing design in Arabic is something I would really like to do. So these are all ideals of mine.
Yeah.
So, but this is, I'm obviously unable to do anything like that yet. But rather than say, oh, this is the place where I will design 10 new games, or this is the place where I will build a company, office downtown and it will be shiny, those are not my ambitions.
No.
So, okay. You have killed me. You have worn me down. So.
Well, we had to try. We tried really hard to do that. So.
All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you to everybody listening. I'm sure you will find many things to criticize. I look forward to it.
And again, thank you for being here, and yeah, for everyone listening, this will be available really soon on the YouTube channel, and hopefully, maybe I can't promise anything, but maybe we'll somehow get it subtitled in Spanish, maybe. So that we have that. We also have that dream of getting this kind of content to the Spanish people if possible. But it's also really hard, so we know the feeling.
All right. Well.
So yeah.
Okay, guys.
I'll see you. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks, Ron, and I'll see you all very soon. Do check out Adept Play and be on the lookout for it. And as I always say,
okay.
And I always finish my videos with the same thing. I always say, live long and prosper, and may the force be with you.
All right. Oh no.
Goodbye.
All right. Good night.